All right, we're going to continue from yesterday. We've been talking about the theme of Bahaloischa es haneros, that you have to light the menorah, as it says in this week's parasha. And specifically, as Rashi points out, that the goal is that the goal is that the flame has to become independently viable. In other words, you don't have to stand there with your hand and the match at the candle at all times. The candle needs to be able to be self-sufficient. And that is supposed to teach us about ourselves, that the way Hashem designed the world is that every single one of us should be self-sufficient. Every single one of us should recognize the independence that we have, the power that we have, the opportunity that we have, the potential that we have. And therefore, Hashem designed the world in such a way that we could actually take ownership of our own spiritual growth and development. That we don't need a crutch. We don't need to be plugged in at all times. We have the opportunity to rise on our own. So the theme that we're using over here to teach us about our own independent power and how much Hashem trusts and believes in us is the theme of the menorah. Now we're going to do today, what we're going to do is something quite interesting about the menorah itself. For us, when we think of a menorah, we think of Hanukkah. Because for us, that's our frame of reference of lighting a menorah. What we don't necessarily realize or think about, we probably realize it, but we don't think about it, is that the menorah of Hanukkah is just simply a memorial and commemoration of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, logically, if the menorah of Hanukkah is supposed to remind us of the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash, logically, they should have the same rules and parameters. Makes sense, right? Because the one is supposed to represent the other. Turns out that's not the case. Turns out they've got totally different rules and actually, apparently, contradictory rules. What do I mean by that? So let's start with Hanukkah because that's more familiar to us. On Hanukkah, you're supposed to put your menorah, as far as the Gemara is concerned, al Pesach Beisoy Mibachutz, the most external door of your house. That's where the menorah is supposed to go. Today, the traditions vary. Some people put the menorah outside their house, some people put it in the window, and some people just simply put it in a doorway across from the mezuzah. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. Whichever particular custom you follow, the law is the same. You are not allowed to light your menorah in one location that is not the correct location. So let's say, for argument's sake, to light the menorah on your dining room table because it's convenient, and then if you pick it up and you take it to place in the window or the doorway, you have not fulfilled the mitzvah. It's very clear you have not fulfilled the mitzvah. And the reason behind that is because halachically, hadlaka oisa mitzvah. That what establishes the mitzvah of lighting the menorah is the lighting. So if there's a requirement where your menorah has to be, and the mitzvah of the menorah is the lighting, then if you don't light it where it's meant to be, you haven't done the mitzvah. Very straightforward and well-known set of parameters for the mitzvah of lighting the menorah on Hanukkah. Let's now compare that to the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple. So the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, the mitzvah was that it had to be lit inside the main building of the temple precinct, which was called the Heichal. The main building, that's where it had to be lit. Now, if we're going to apply the same logic as we do to a menorah of Hanukkah, which is hadlaka oisa mitzvah, that where you light it, that's where the mitzvah happens, then logic would say the only place you're allowed to light the menorah is while the menorah is physically inside the building of the Beis Hamikdash, because that's where it's supposed to be. So in order to fulfill the mitzvah, you have to light it there. When you take a look at the Rambam, for example, the Rambam says something very intriguing. He says, hadlaka kshera bezar. It's based on the Gemara. The Gemara says that you do not have to be a kohen to light the menorah. Any Jew is allowed to light the menorah. You do require a kohen to set up the menorah, to clear out the old wicks, to refill the oil, to put in the new wicks. That has to be a kohen. But the actual lighting of the menorah, kshera bezar, is acceptable even with a non-kohen. Now you have a practical question. If the menorah has to be lit inside the Heichal, and only a kohen is allowed to go into the Heichal, then how on earth can anybody who's not a kohen ever light the menorah? It's a nice theory. So theoretically, you could light the menorah if you're not a kohen. Practically you can't, because you're not allowed into that area. So some of the commentaries want to suggest that you could take a very, very long pole with a torch on the end of it and stand outside and extend the pole inside and light the menorah. I'm not quite sure how practical that is. The distance was quite a distance, number one. And number two, how could you really see what you were doing if you were outdoors and trying to light the menorah that was indoors? Doesn't sound very practical. The Rambam offers a different solution. The Rambam says it is absolutely acceptable to take the menorah out of the building, bring the menorah into the courtyard, let a non-Kohen light the menorah in the courtyard, and then you pick it up and you take it back into the place where it belongs and you set it down. Now that seems to be a direct contradiction to the laws of Hanukkah, because in the laws of Hanukkah, and bearing in mind again that the menorah of Hanukkah is supposed to commemorate the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. So you would just assume that something which commemorates something else would have similar rules and restrictions. So the menorah of Hanukkah, you're not allowed to move once you've lit it, and if you light it in the wrong place, it's disqualified. Yet the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash, you are apparently allowed to move, and if you light it in the wrong place, it's still okay. It's still acceptable. It's quite something, right? So what is the law telling us about lighting this menorah? Remember that our theme is Shalheves Olam Me'eleha, that the theme of the menorah is the menorah represents you and I. And the branches of the menorah represent the different branches of how we may serve Hashem. Different approaches, the approach of love of Hashem, the approach of fear of Hashem, etc. The actual golden menorah represents the human, the physical human. And the lamps of the menorah represent the neshama that is supposed to illuminate that human being. And the theme is Shalheves Olam Me'eleha, that the ultimate goal of the menorah is that each independent menorah becomes independently viable. That none of us has to rely on someone else who's constantly inspiring us and constantly feeding us. The goal is that we should be able to build up so much resource of spirituality that we can actually, so to speak, operate on our own. That's why when we're taught the law of the menorah, the law is taught in such a way to get us as far away as possible from the belief that you need external help. If the menorah could only be lit by a Kohen, then the message would be clear: you don't have the power. Only certain elite individuals who are at a special spiritual level, only they have the power to ignite neshamas. You don't. So therefore the Gemara and subsequently the Rambam make a big deal over the fact that anybody can light the menorah. You don't have to have a special qualification. Every single Jew is empowered to do so. And if the menorah could only be lit inside the Beis Hamikdash, the message would be, you can only light your menorah in the right kind of environment. If you're in a holy, pristine, spiritual, uplifting place, then your environment will give you the wherewithal to be able to achieve what Hashem wants, which is to ignite your neshama. Therefore, the law is clear, according to the Rambam, that you can take the menorah out of the holy environment specifically and put it into an environment that is open to everybody, to emphasize again that the message is every single person is capable of lighting and inspiring and progressing on their own. There's a Kohen at the beginning. The Kohen gives you the match. You can't invent your own Judaism. There has to be a Kohen, there have to be leaders, there have to be tzaddikim, and they'll tell us this is what a menorah is supposed to look like, and this is what you're supposed to do. But no one else can do the work for us. That the goal is the flame should be able to rise and ignite on its own. Now, I'll tell you something interesting about that phrase. Tehei is, in the way we've translated it, until it happens, shetahei, that it should happen. Like, for example, when we say on Rosh Hashanah, we dip the apple in honey, and we say, Yehi ratzon, may be your will, Hashem, shetechadeish aleinu, that it should be a good new year for us. Shetahei, it should be that the flame rises on its own. The difference is that the word shetahei actually implies guarantee. It's a guarantee that at some point every neshama will illuminate. Now that's quite a powerful statement, right? It's a guarantee that at some point every neshama will illuminate. How can you make such a guarantee? And does that not undermine what we've just said? Because we've said that the whole point is you can achieve with your choices and with your push. You can achieve and you can own the value of that achievement. If it's something which is guaranteed to happen, how's it your achievement? Sounds like you're being assisted. Sounds like you're being held. How is it your achievement? So the Rambam, in a different area of law, in the laws of divorce, teaches us one of the most fascinating psycho-spiritual insights into being Jewish. This is what the Rambam says. What happens if there is a scenario where a man is required by Jewish law to divorce his wife, but he refuses to do so? Now, in Torah law, a woman may not divorce a man. The man has to initiate the divorce proceedings, and he has to do it of his own volition. So what do you do now? You've got a person who doesn't want to do it. The law requires that he does it, and he refuses. Says the Rambam, based on the Gemara, Koifin oisoi ad she'omer roitze ani. You strong arm him, you force him until he says, I want to do it. Which of course sounds totally self-contradictory. If you're forcing somebody, then when he says, I want to do it, how can you possibly believe that that is genuine? And by the way, force means all kinds of things. In Israel, a person can be imprisoned for not divorcing, for not granting the wife a divorce. Here in South Africa, we can put the person in cherem and exclude them from communal activities. Once upon a time, not very long ago, they used to send a hit squad and give the guy a couple of nice reminders about how important it is to divorce under those circumstances. So Koifin has a very broad explanation, even to the extent that the Rambam offers the possibility of the non-Jewish world getting involved. So you can hire a couple of thugs. They don't necessarily have to be from your local shul to go and rough the guy up. Now, how does this make any sense? Koifin oiso, you force the person, and then he says, oh, I want to. The Rambam says the most revealing statement. He says, every Jew, by our very nature, wants to do whatever Hashem expects of us. That is who we are. That is the core of our being. It's not that Hashem has to inspire or affect or move us to want to be dedicated. It is us. That is our true self. The problem is that occasionally our Yetzer Hara gets in the way. And the expression he uses is Yitzroi hu she'onsoi. Sometimes your Yetzer Hara abducts you. It takes you hostage. Ever had this feeling? If I'm taken hostage by my Yetzer Hara, I wish I could behave differently, but I feel that I can't stop myself. So that's why sometimes the person needs a bit of external pressure, not on them, but on their Yetzer Hara. It's kind of a reminder, hello, you're off the path over here. You've lost your way. You've forgotten what it is that your own neshama wants to do. And that's why we can make such a radical statement and say, Shetahei, it is guaranteed that at some point in every person's life, that neshama will switch on. Not because some compelling incident or some catalyst is going to bring out our neshama, but rather because fundamentally it is who we are. And if it's who we are, how is it possible that it will never ever come to the surface? So that's quite a positive note for us to consider, that Hashem has absolute trust in us. He believes that we are capable of rising to the occasion. He believes that we can own our own choices and make the right choices and thereby achieve spiritually. And he kind of guarantees it because the way our neshama is designed is that's where it actually belongs and that's where it naturally will go.